Tonight, invasion consequences.
We are going to be imposing significant sanctions on Russia.
Russia moves in troops to the eastern border of Ukraine. Plus,
Special Counsel John Durham has tied 2016 Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton to an effort to infiltrate Trump Tower computer servers.
The Durham report. Does it close the door on questions the Clinton campaign exploited government databases to snoop on Donald Trump and his associates in the 2016 race for the White House? And in the wake of targeted violence,
we're all dealing with threats of violence in churches, mosques, and synagogues.
Bringing neighbors from all faiths together. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
President Biden announces the first tranche of sanctions against Russia. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation in Washington, D.C. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I am John Jessup. The showdown continues. Vladimir Putin tonight facing severe sanctions from the United States and European allies, finally making moves sending Russian troops into Ukraine's borders.
President Biden now getting more specific about that punishment, hoping to stop Putin from crossing further into Ukraine. Meanwhile, American soldiers are waiting in Poland to help refugees running for safety. CBN's Brody Carter joins us with tonight's top story. Brody?
John, Jenna, NATO is going after President Putin's money. That's the game plan President Biden revealed after Putin took major steps to steal territory in Ukraine. Mr. Biden says more sanctions will come if Russia continues to invade.
We're implementing full blocking sanctions on two large Russian financial institutions, VEB and their military bank. We're implementing comprehensive sanctions on Russia's sovereign debt. That means we've cut off Russia's government from Western financing. It can no longer raise money from the West and cannot trade in its new debt on our markets or European markets either. Starting tomorrow,
it's hindered Soviet expansion by recognizing the Donetsk and Luhansk republics and moving troops into the Donbass region. Putin makes Ukraine more vulnerable. Monday, most UN Security Council members agreed Putin's latest moves violate international law and are vowing sanctions. Afterward, President Biden signing an executive order barring all trade, new investments, and future financing throughout the Donbass region. In Germany, Chancellor Olaf Scholz made a long-awaited decision to halt the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, a key natural gas link between Germany and Russia. The United Kingdom also moved to target 5 Russian banks and go after the money of Vladimir Putin's inner circle.
as we respond, my administration is using every tool at our disposal to protect American businesses and consumers from rising prices at the pump. As I said last week, defending freedom will have cost for us as well and here at home. We need to be honest about that.
So far, a number of congressional leaders from both parties are still criticizing Biden for not pressing harder on Putin's plan to revive the Soviet Union. U.S. troops in Poland are bracing for possible Ukrainian refugees likely to evacuate if and when Russian troops enter the area. John, back to you.
And here now, CBN senior international correspondent George Thomas in Lviv, Ukraine. George, can you describe what you're seeing and hearing in Ukraine today compared to what it was like before Putin laid claim to Donetsk and Luhansk in the Donbass yesterday?
Yeah, the big takeaway as I spent time on the streets of Lviv today was just this idea that how dare Russia would absolutely dismiss categorically that Ukraine is a sovereign and independent country. The sense of dismissing Ukraine has really come off with a very bad taste in their mouths here in Ukraine. This idea that after 30 years of independence and as a flourishing democracy, politically, economically, in all other ways, to simply just with a flick of a hand, dismiss Ukraine as even call into question its existence and the fact that it's part of Mother Russia. That has really hit a chord, struck a chord in the very heart of Ukrainians, and I heard it overwhelmingly. That was the first thing people said to me as soon as I asked them about their thoughts about Putin's speech yesterday.
So if you hit them in the pocketbooks, if you limit those sanctions, and as we heard Germany also impose their statements on Nord Stream 2 is a no-go for right now. Do you think that that still has the potential to alter Putin's course?
Look, based on his speech last night and the sentiment here on the streets of Ukraine, it is that this is not just about a military action that is limited to the eastern part of Ukraine. You had this sense last night that this was much, much bigger than Ukraine. In fact, Moscow wants to draw the lines back to the Cold War days. And so that's what you're dealing with. That is what people are most concerned about.
George, I also want to ask you about China. How much does Putin's latest move test the relationship between China and Russia, seen as allies?
China's foreign minister came out saying that they support the integrity and the independence of Ukraine. Let's see in the days and weeks ahead how that calculus would change. But we already know, we've been reporting on this, that the Russia-China axis has been growing by the year. The trade and the investment and the political connections are enormous. And some are talking about a geopolitical seismic change in terms of the alliance. And what you see here is China, Iran, Russia on one hand, and the United States and the rest of the world on the other side.
Our eyes and ears on the ground, senior international correspondent George Thomas. George, thank you so much for your reporting. Be safe.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
And thank you, George. In other news tonight, a tech executive is accused of exploiting access to White House data, looking for damning information about former President Donald Trump. That is just one of many bombshell revelations filed by special counsel John Durham. And it's igniting a firestorm here in Washington.
CBN's Tara Mergener has this report on why some are accusing the media of going silent on the finding of Durham's 3-year probe, a probe that dives into the origins of the 2016 FBI investigation into whether Russia colluded with Donald Trump's first presidential campaign.
Some legal observers insist the filing proves what President Trump and many of his supporters maintained all along, specifically that opponents were spying on him and that Hillary Clinton's campaign lied about its involvement. At issue, Durham's memo pointing out Clinton's campaign paid for computer research to link then-candidate Donald Trump to Russia, mining data from Trump Tower and later the White House, a claim Trump has been repeating for years.
They spied on my campaign.
Well, there's no real evidence of that.
Of course there is.
The 13-page document sparked opposite reactions from the 2016 presidential rivals. Trump calling it the crime of the century, Clinton a fake scandal.
This kind of unauthorized access of a computer system or access that goes beyond authorization that you've been given is a federal crime.
Durham's latest filing stems from the case against former Hillary Clinton campaign attorney Michael Sussman. He is accused of lying to the FBI. According to Durham, Sussman claimed he didn't work for her campaign when he went to the Justice Department pushing a Russia collusion narrative between Trump Tower and a Kremlin-linked bank. Sussman's legal team followed this latest filing with a motion to dismiss Durham's case, calling it prosecutorial overreach. In the filing, Durham suggests Sussman's allies exploited government databases to snoop on the Trump White House, saying cyber researchers had access to this trove of data through a federal government contract.
It's probable or possible that, in essence, a political presidential campaign was using cyber tools to spy on another campaign and then continue to do that spying once the other candidate became president.
In the rebuttal filing, lawyers insist Durham is wrong, arguing that the data was properly obtained and actually gathered while Barack Obama was in the White House. Sussman's lawyers also claim they found potentially alarming links from Trump to Russia and say it was within the purview of their government contract to look for security threats. Some legal analysts say the document isn't the smoking gun evidence conservatives are touting it to be.
I don't think you can credibly call this, illicit spying. This was, really cybersecurity experts and analysts kind of doing what they were supposed to do, which is look for suspicious patterns.
So far, Durham has not charged anyone with spying on Trump, The filing also did not state that any content from the White House communications was compromised.
It's just sort of striking that whether or not you think they might have done something questionable, Durham himself doesn't seem to have regarded it as criminal.
As the facts play out, the treatment from the mainstream media ranges from excitement to oblivious, depending on their audience.
Special counsel John Durham has tied 2016 Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton to an effort to infiltrate Trump Tower computer servers.
And America says investigate Hillary Clinton.
Republicans are criticizing certain media outlets for not pursuing this story with the same vigor as they did Russia allegations.
If this was the other way, if this was a story about how the Trump campaign had hired some data experts and others to go out there and do this to a President Clinton, this would be like we wouldn't be able to talk about anything else around here.
Compare that, critics say, to Russian collusion allegations against President Trump, dominating more than 2,600 minutes of airtime on the major network's evening newscasts through the first half of 2019. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Thank you, Tara. Well, turning overseas tonight, where to the Middle East, where Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett is criticizing an emerging deal over Iran's nuclear program. Naftali saying it would be weaker than the previous agreement and create a more violent Middle East. World powers have been negotiating in Vienna to revive the 2015 nuclear deal, which the Trump administration withdrew from in 2018. Bennett warns Iran has moved ahead since then with its enrichment of uranium to levels approaching weapons grade. He says Israel will not accept a nuclear Iran.
And back here.
We have a clear and unnegotiable red line. Israel will always maintain its freedom of action to defend itself.
And back here at home, a guilty verdict in the federal hate crimes charges against the convicted killers of Ahmaud Arbery. It took the jury 2 hours of deliberating to find that the 3 white defendants were motivated by Arbery's race and color before chasing and killing him. Father and son Greg and Travis McMichael and neighbor William Roddy Bryan had already been convicted in the state of Georgia for murder late last year.
Another high-profile case is nearing its conclusion. In Minnesota, a federal prosecutor said the 3 Minneapolis police officers charged with depriving George Floyd of his right to medical care, quote, chose to do nothing when he died under the knee of Derek Chauvin. The month-long trial now heads to the jury.
Coming up, backlash over COVID restrictions. The message on its way to Washington, loud and clear. Welcome back. Growing fallout tonight after the Canadian government's response to that weeks-long protest over COVID restrictions. To prevent any new blockades, lawmakers voted Monday night to extend the emergency powers used to break up protests. Here's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau making the case to Parliament before the vote.
But even though the blockades are lifted across border openings right now, even though things seem to be resolving very well in Ottawa, this state of emergency is not over.
Now, there were some weekend clashes between police and protesters, but streets in Canada's capital of Ottawa are mostly quiet now, though Trudeau's opponents decry the Emergency Act's no-go zones and a provision allowing police to freeze truckers' personal and corporate bank accounts and compel towing companies to haul away vehicles.
Meanwhile, here in the States, a group of U.S. truckers is traveling cross-country to protest COVID restrictions. Starting in Southern California today, the People's Convoy plans on making around 10 stops on its way to the Washington, D.C. area. The group won't enter the district itself when it arrives next week and says it will abide by agreements with local authorities. Group members are calling for an end to the COVID national emergency extended earlier this month by President Biden, as well as the withdrawal of vaccine and mask mandates. And with that, let's bring in our CBN News chief political analyst, David Brody. David, the trucker protests that clogged the northern border between the U.S. and Canada appear to be coming here to the United States. Are COVID restrictions still going to be a big issue in the months to come, especially as we head into the November midterms?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. And you talk about it being COVID restrictions, and that's what it is, technically. But there's a much broader issue at play, and that is government overreach. Tyranny is what the protesters will call it. And so if you look at it from that standpoint, this is where the Biden administration and quite frankly, Justin Trudeau up in Canada have some serious problems. Look, as it relates to Canada, Trudeau may have won the battle with the Emergency Powers Act, but could very well lose the war because he has awoken many Canadians up there in places like Calgary and Quebec and Toronto and many other places where they're coming out in droves now because of some of those heavy-handed tactics.
David, President Trump in a statement today blamed Russia's military invasion on President Biden, and he dismissed the White House sanctions as, quote, insignificant. The White House says its slate of sanctions are designed to escalate in coordination with NATO and European allies. Germany already said Nord Stream 2 is off the table. David, it is significant to think that just a few years ago, we were talking about the utility of NATO.
Well, that's true. That's a good point, John. Look, how do I say this? I guess there's a term kind of like sanctions, schmanctions. You know, it's like Putin knew he was going to get sanctions if he went in, and he's gone in. And let's be clear, can we stop the peacekeeping nonsense? Okay, it's he's invaded a country, another country, as George Thomas pointed out at the top of the show. So let's stop the theatrics or the semantics here as it relates to he's just bringing in some peacekeeping forces. Give me a break. So that's that. But look, I think ultimately what we're talking about here is that, you know, Biden has a bigger problem on his hands. It's not, at least politically, it's not just Ukraine, but if you go back to Afghanistan, and then it becomes a competency issue. And I think for Biden, that's the bigger problem, at least politically, with these midterms coming up.
David, there's been a lot of, hubbub over the former president's new social media venture, Truth Social, topping the list of free apps on the Apple Store. Some users, though, reportedly got an error message when they tried to create an account. Do you think this site has legs? Is it going anywhere?
Well, they're off to a horrible start. Let's just start with that. By the way, this just in, I'm 168,000 on the waiting list. And probably growing at this point. Look, I mean, how do you start an app and then all of a sudden put people on a waiting list? I get it. In a couple of weeks, apparently it's all going to be resolved. But why? Because there's some VIPs all of a sudden at the beginning of Truth Social, and then you're going to let the rest of the peons in a couple of weeks. Give me a break. I mean, the whole thing was stupid. But having said that, yeah, I think it'll be really effective once it gets going. You know, it's going to be, you know how you have tweets and retweets now. These will be truths and retruths. And it's going to look very much like Twitter. So, well, here we go.
David, last question here, and we're just a little under a minute left. We're a week away from President Biden's State of the Union address. Shortly after that address, the government is set to lose funding and run out of money again. David, what does that tell you about the state of American government?
Disorganized, chaotic, divisive. Nothing gets done. But here's the truth in terms of government funding running out. Hey, I have a little secret. Can I whisper it? I'm on a microphone. I don't think it matters if I whisper or not. The government is going to get funded, folks. The government will get funded. This is what they do. It's the cat and mouse game all the time. Yeah, sometimes they'll shut down the government for a couple of weeks, but typically what they do is they'll just do what they call an extension. Right. I forgot the name of it now. I can't even think of the gobbledygook extension name. But they have a bigger name for it than I just said. That's what they're going to do. They're going to kick the can down the road for another 3 months, and then they'll continue on. Look, it's just a circus. John, this is just a circus. And Biden will say, he'll come out on February or March 1st and say, the state of our union is strong. Yeah, okay, it's a bit chaotic as well.
David, we are out of time. Thank you so much, CBN's David Brody. Appreciate your time and insights.
All right, thanks.
And when we come back, in the aftermath of targeted violence against Jews, how neighbors from different faiths can come together.
Well, welcome back. We're learning more in the aftermath of last month's Texas synagogue attack, shining new light on a behind-the-scenes effort between faith leaders.
Their cooperation helped resolve the crisis as a Southern Baptist pastor helped bring imams, rabbis, and law enforcement together. Senior National Affairs correspondent Heather Sells reports.
When the crisis came and they needed help, I could respond. And so it was basically purely because of the relationships.
The recent synagogue attack in North Texas brought together leaders from 3 faiths who already had forged relationships. This multi-faith bridge building is helping to advance the well-being of our country's growing diverse communities.
For more than 20 years, Southern Baptist pastor Bob Roberts has sought to be a peacemaker, seeking out Islamic, Jewish, and other faith leaders worldwide to work for the common good. The effort paid off in his own backyard January 15th when a gunman took a rabbi and 3 others hostage in a nearby synagogue. Roberts began working his network, quickly calling on a local imam to come to the scene.
I explained to them that this man could de-escalate the situation like no one else. And so it enabled us to get him in the room with us, and we were able to work scenarios. At the same time, the rabbi's family was there in the room, so we were with them, giving them comfort. It was all about relationships.
After a 10-hour siege, the hostages escaped as the FBI shot and killed the gunman.
Colleyville's one of the safest cities in Texas.
Authorities say the gunman demanded the release of a Pakistani scientist convicted of trying to kill U.S. troops in Afghanistan and serving her sentence near Colleyville. They also report the gunman made anti-Semitic statements. Colleyville is just the latest in a resurgence of hate crimes in the U.S., specifically anti-Semitism. It's one more reason why Roberts says this work is so important.
We're all dealing with threats of violence in churches, mosques, and synagogues. And if we don't come together and have some consistent ways of working together when these crises comes, we're in trouble.
The attack and Roberts' role may well spur interest in this approach. Registration has spiked for a multi-faith forum in March that will bring together high-profile pastors, rabbis, and imams.
If these efforts continue to expand, proponents say they could help to build stronger communities. Heather Sells, CBN News.
And finally tonight, an uplifting reminder that hard work pays off.
Every athlete dreams of winning a state championship, but virtually none has overcome what Adonis Lattimore did. The high schooler was born without a right leg and with a partial left leg. But that did not stop him from winning the Virginia State Wrestling Championship last weekend, surprising everyone but himself. The Lansdowne senior says he dreamt about this moment since he was in 2nd grade when he first discovered wrestling. Lattimore adds that he plans to continue his wrestling career at the collegiate level.
Jenna,
congratulations to him.
Watching that video, how inspiring. It's just a reminder that we can pretty much do anything we set our minds to.
Absolutely. It'll be fun to see what college he chooses, where he goes.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching.
Have a great night.